have a cup of tea with your character and just hang out with them. Just see, what is it like to be with them? What is it like to be their friend? What is it like to take a walk with them? Like, what is it like to have dinner with them? You know, just hang out with them and they will reveal themselves to you. Don't force yourself and try to force your character into a mold that you think he should fit in.
Sir Thomas More from the film A Man for All Seasons.
Forrest Gump.
Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver.
Indiana Jones.
Scarlett O'Hara.
Paul Haggis's Officer John Ryan in the film Crash.
My favorite film character is John Bender from The Breakfast Club, which was written and directed by John Hughes. Probably why he's my favorite film character is with John Bender, he has character traits that when I was in high school, when I saw The Breakfast Club, that I could relate to. But more importantly, John Bender was a character that had layers.
I think I've got two favorite film characters. One would be Oscar Schindler, and the other would be George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. And as I've been thinking about those two guys and why I like them, and I think it's because they both started out pursuing their own ends. You know, Oscar Schindler just wanted to make some money during the war, and George Bailey had his dream of going out and being an architect in the big wide world, and they both ended up not getting what they wanted, but really spending everything that would have satisfied their own goals for this community of people around them that they sort of reluctantly sacrifice things for, but who end up becoming almost better than a family to them. And so in many ways, I see them both as the same person, and I think that they have a lot to say to all of us. I feel like they have a lot to say to me because maybe in some way they are me, or they're the person I need to be.
One would be Michael Scott from The Office, and the other is Liz Lemon from 30 Rock, and that's because they make me laugh every single time I tune in. And they just do over-the-top ridiculous things, and it's always hilarious, and there's something to be said for making people laugh, as Preston Sturges would say.
My favorite television character is most definitely Dexter. It is one of the most interesting television shows, completely character-driven, and it's about a serial killer who only kills serial killers, and it completely messes with your head because you don't want to be rooting for this guy because he's a serial killer, and you know he's a serial killer, but then at the same time you kind of think, you're like, well, there's one less bad person on the street, so some lives are going to be saved, but at the same time, for that to happen, he had to be killed. And so it's just, Dexter's one of those shows where you turn it on and you're ripping yourself both ways because you want him to succeed and you want him to, you know, get through and help somebody out by killing somebody. And so that's kind of the dilemma with Dexter, but I love the character. I love how dark, I love how sinister he is. And as the series has been progressing, they're throwing in more aspects of how can this person who is so broken from his childhood and the way he was brought up and just all of the things that have happened become a human being and exist with other human beings and actually be civil.
My favorite character in television was in a very short running show called Eli Stone, and it was Eli. He is a lawyer who receives word from God that he's a prophet, and there is, again, a search for identity and what it means to know things before they happen, to second-guess yourself, what it means to second-guess yourself as a person, and also in all the relationships that he ends up having to work through. His relationship to his boss, his relationship to the love interest, his relationship to his father who is deceased but had a similar gift. It was an intriguing show, and his character was consistent, and his arc was very real because it went from being ambivalent to standing up in your purpose in a way that I haven't seen a character on television ever do.
I think that story comes first, and story is comprised of both character and plot. On a very practical level, the way it happens when you're writing a movie is somebody may say, well, let's do a movie about, you know, what happens if What happens if Russian terrorists take over Air Force One with the president's family on board? Well, if you're the writer of that, you have a plot that you have to deal with, and then you start saying, well, who would be the character who would best work within this plot to create an interesting and a compelling story? So I think that plot and character are married and together create the story.
I can answer that in terms of my experience in television, and especially in sketch comedy, where character really is everything, I think, in terms of the characters that come out of the cast and the characters that come out of the writers. I do think that the writer also strives to come up, especially in television writing, funny ideas and funny premises for shows and sketches. But thinking back, we always tried to cater and try and kind of mold everything around a character. And we always thought, boy, wouldn't that be funny for that character? And if we had a sketch idea on some of the sketch shows I worked on, it would always be a sketch idea that we thought would be funny for a cast member who did a specific character, or to go to a cast member and create a character with them before we even had necessarily a specific idea.
I think story is always better done if it's a character driving it. It's a character's motivations and it's a character's wants. And I mean, if the story dictates that a character does something, then it feels wooden. It doesn't feel real.
I will put that character in situations where, well, if this character was in a coffee house and saw someone trip and fall, what would that character do? Or if this character was in a conversation and heard someone say something disparaging about another person, what would that character do? I would also just sit down and write about the character's background, you know, what his childhood was like, the town he grew up in, you know, did he have brothers and sisters? How was he treated? Did he ever have his heart broken? What kind of car does he drive? If he sat down at a diner, what would he order? How does he walk? Is he the type of person that shops in a mall or shops in a boutique? All these like tiny details about his life inform me about what kind of person he is. Like, you know, even what kind of, did he go to college and what kind of college was it? You know, his major and everything. So I like to think about the little details of a character, which will give me the big picture.
Vinnie Ream. She's a historical character from the 1880s that really existed in Washington, D.C. She was a great person to start with because she was already very magical and charismatic in her own right, but something about writing her made me feel alive, and I could see her. I could see her in a way that I've never seen any of my characters before, and I hope that I write every woman like I write Vinnie.
I think that my favorite character that I've ever written is not somebody I invented, but it was the character of Dr. Joseph Mengele, the Nazi physician. And the reason that, you know, I certainly wouldn't think of him as somebody I would want to have as a friend, but I think we were able to take the audience behind the curtain and give them insight into one of the most evil human beings that modern history knows, in a way that was surprising, in a way that led people to begin to sort of sympathize with his reasoning before they were horrified at themselves for having sympathized with his reasoning. So in that way, that's a character who I think just audiences have responded to in a powerful way. I think he's made an impression on them, and I think that the journey into his psyche is, it's an insight into how evil really works.
Every character has to have voice.
You need to
craft this character that's true to himself or herself, and that continues in this way in which you know they would act, you know they would speak, you know how they would feel, because it's so easy to sacrifice a character's integrity for the plot.
Integrity in a character in the sense of a moral backbone.
Give the character real human characteristics.
Drama is conflict. You cannot have drama without conflict. So when you're creating your characters, remember to have the biggest conflict you can imagine.
I like to see characters that have a giant need that they have to fulfill to become whole.
You have to make sure that your character is on a teeter-totter, and they're either on the upswing or the downswing. If your character's just sitting at a level, straight level 0, it's not going to work. A character is all about having ambitions, but having fears as well. And they're either going for an ambition or they're running from a fear.
I think if a writer loves his characters, finds understanding, empathy for them, and argues their case forcefully, even if there's somebody sort of abhorrent, then you're going to write characters with compassion, and audiences are going to get insight into those characters. Sometimes it's a very tough thing to do, because sometimes we write some pretty horrible people as antagonists or as villains, but it's a great exercise for us as human beings as well as writers, and it's sort of a gift, I think, that we can give our audience if we allow them to look with compassion on every character that we write.